It was a crisp Saturday morning in early fall when I first saw her. Karen. Blonde bob. Sunglasses too big for her face, and that unmistakable air of entitlement. I had just started unpacking groceries from my truck into my cabin, which sat nestled in the hills of Cedar Creek, a quiet little retreat where people came to escape HOA drama and the chaos of city life. That's why I bought the place. Peace, nature, and silence. But peace was the last thing I got that day. I heard a car engine growl behind me and turned to see a sleek black SUV pull up the gravel path like it owned the woods. The tires kicked up a cloud of dust that settled over the woodpile I'd neatly stacked the night before. Out stepped Karen, clipboard in hand, like she was inspecting a crime scene. "You can't be here," she said before I could even greet her. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "This cabin," she said, gesturing like she was pointing out an ugly stain. "It belongs to the Pine Hollow Residence Committee, and you're trespassing. I'll give you 20 minutes to pack your things and leave before I call the sheriff." I nearly laughed. This had to be a prank. I'd bought the cabin 6 months ago fair and square from an old man named Lou Dobson, who said the land had been in his family for decades. I'd even done the paperwork myself to make sure everything was legal. So to have a stranger roll up and declare I was trespassing on my land. Mom," I said as calmly as I could, "this cabin is mine. I have the deed. I've been living here off and on for half a year. Who exactly are you?" She straightened, squinting at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm Karen McAllister. I represent the Pine Hollow Residence Committee. That cabin falls under our oversight. Now we're converting the area into an eco-retreat community. That includes regulating who stays where. And according to our records, this lot is part of our plan. So again, you'll need to leave." Now, I'd heard stories about HOA Karens who overstepped their bounds, but this wasn't even a neighborhood. This was the woods. Pine Hollow was miles down the road, a gated lakeside development with modern homes and matching mailboxes. I didn't even know it extended this far north. Apparently, neither did she. "I'm not part of Pine Hollow," I said. "This land sits just outside the border. You can check with the county if you want." Karen scoffed. "Oh, we have. There's been a lot of confusion about property lines up here. It's complicated. But bottom line, you're not supposed to be here. This cabin isn't yours." That's when I got suspicious. Not confused, suspicious, because I'd done a title search before I bought the place. And during that process, I discovered something odd. The land my cabin sat on was tied to a larger parcel of land that overlapped with a few neighboring lots, including one at the edge of Pine Hollow. But I hadn't thought anything of it, till now. "I think you're confused," I told her, turning back to my truck. I pulled out a folder from the glove box and handed it to her. "That's my deed, registered with the county. Lot 17B, plus the surrounding 5-acre woodland buffer. See the name?" She glanced at it, then looked again. Her lips parted. "Why does it say McAllister?" "That's me, McAllister. I inherited the name from my grandfather. You might know the name if you go back far enough in Pine Hollow records." I watched the blood drain from her face, because Pine Hollow was built on land sold off in pieces by the Dobson family and the McAllister family, two old lines that had settled the area 100 years ago. Most of the McAllister holdings had been split, sold, or forfeited long ago. But apparently, a few legal ties remained. "You bought this land from Lou Dobson?" she asked, clearly rattled. "I did, with the cabin and everything on it. It's mine now." Karen's face twisted. "That doesn't mean you can live here." I raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that what owning land is for?" She fumed silently, fingers tapping the clipboard like a gavel. "This isn't over," she muttered. "If your name is tied to that land, then we have bigger problems. That means part of my property might still be under your name. And if that's the case, then you might be the one trespassing." I finished. That shut her up. She got back in her SUV, slammed the door, and peeled out without another word. I watched her disappear down the winding dirt path, heart still thumping, but a grin spreading across my face. Karen had just picked a fight with the one person in the valley who had more claim to her world than she realized. And I hadn't even told her the best part yet. I'd done more than buy that land. I'd filed an inquiry into the original McAllister holdings to see how much was still legally mine after all these years. The answer? Quite a bit, and yes, some of it included her property. 2 days later, I got a knock at the door just as I was chopping firewood behind the cabin. Not a gentle knock, either 3 sharp, angry bangs like the door owed her money. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Karen stood there again. This time with a man in a navy suit and polished shoes that looked like they'd never touched a dirt road in their life. His briefcase screamed corporate attorney, and his expression looked like he had better things to do than be dragged into some backwoods feud. Karen, on the other hand, looked absolutely thrilled to be here, arms crossed, lips pursed, and eyes scanning my property like a security guard on a power trip. "Good morning," I said, casually tossing a log into the fire pit. "Back so soon. This is Mr. Kendall," Karen snapped, before I could even invite them in. "He's legal counsel for the Pine Hollow Committee. We've reviewed the property situation, and there are complications. You're occupying a structure that's part of our long-term development plan. Now we're here to formally notify you that legal action is being pursued for removal." "Removal," I repeated. "You're suing me off my own land." Mr. Kendall stepped forward and opened his briefcase, pulling out a crisp manila envelope. "As per the development rights of Pine Hollow and the environmental zoning agreement registered with the county 6 years ago, your structure was identified as a potential non-compliant dwelling." "Non-compliant with what?" I cut in. "This cabin's been here since the 1960s. It predates Pine Hollow by at least 30 years. Karen smirked. "And yet, here you are squatting like it's yours." "Oh, it is mine," I said, walking back into the cabin. "Wait here." I didn't have to dig far. I kept my paperwork organized in a small cabinet by the kitchen table. And within minutes, I returned with a thick binder containing every shred of legal evidence they could possibly need. Title, deed, survey maps, zoning clearance. The bill of sale with county stamps and dates going back to the original McAllister Dobson. Boundary settlements. I handed it to Mr. Kendall. He took it without a word and began flipping through it with his brow furrowed. Karen kept pacing near the front porch like she was waiting for a confession. 5 pages in, the lawyer's eyes paused, then narrowed. "Is this accurate?" he asked slowly, pointing to a map. "Yep, Lot 17B with a 5-acre buffer. Legally registered and surveyed 6 months ago. But here's the kicker." I flipped to the next page, that dotted line. "That's the original McAllister holding line. See that tiny rectangular cut that juts into the Pine Hollow border?" Karen leaned in. "That's your lot," I said, looking directly at her. "Turns out your back patio and half your koi pond are sitting on land that's technically still under the McAllister Trust. That trust now belongs to me." Karen's face went full chalk white dot. "Mr. Kendall cleared his throat. "This may need to be reviewed more thoroughly. Property overlaps of this nature, especially ones tied to old family trust can take months to resolve." Karen turned to him. "What are you talking about? This guy's cabin is clearly on our development map. We've got plans drawn up for a guest spa in that location. And those plans are based on outdated surveys," I said, "which Pine Hollow failed to update when you expanded past the creek without verifying the easement rights. Your committee built out past your original boundary. I have the satellite images, dated surveys, and digital overlays to prove it." Mr. Kendall looked like he'd just bitten into a lemon. Karen, on the other hand, exploded. You think this little shack gives you the right to mess up a multi-million-dollar project? We've already sold 3 of those lots. I have investors, timelines, and you also have no legal ground to stand on, I said calmly. Not until you settle the overlapping deeds, which means you can't touch my cabin, can't build. Here, and if we're being honest, you might want to check how much of your own home actually belongs to you. Because if I really wanted to push it, I let that trail off. Karen's mouth opened like she was about to scream, but she didn't. For the first time since she showed up, she had no comeback. She just stood there, fuming, shaking with frustration. Mr. Kendall shut the binder gently and handed it back to me. This is a developing situation, he said quietly. I'd advise you to remain available in case we need to revisit the boundaries or propose a settlement. Happy to, I replied, as long as no one else shows up trying to evict me from my own property. He gave a short nod and turned back toward the SUV. Karen followed, seething but before she climbed in. She turned to me one last time and hissed, "You'll regret this." Already regretting I didn't buy more of the land, I shot back. The SUV roared away. I walked back inside and sat down at the kitchen table, my fingers tapping against the binder. I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen didn't just walk away. They regrouped, they schemed. And I had a feeling she was about to throw everything she had at this battle. But I wasn't worried, because I wasn't bluffing, and she was just now realizing I held the upper hand. I didn't hear from Karen or her lawyer for a few weeks. The quiet was unsettling, like the calm before a storm. I spent the time clearing brush, stacking more firewood, and upgrading my solar panels. I even started building a small shed for my tools. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen don't take legal losses lightly, especially not ones that hit them in their perfectly manicured backyards. Then one morning, I got a certified letter in the mail from the Pine Hollow Residents Committee. It was addressed to Ryan McAllister, trustee of the McAllister Land Grant. That title alone made me laugh out loud. Funny how just a few months ago, I was a nobody with a fixer-upper cabin. Now, I was apparently the legal barrier standing between Karen and her dream eco-retreat. The letter wasn't a threat this time. It was a proposal. They wanted to amicably resolve the boundary issue by offering me a cash settlement in exchange for full rights to Lot 17B and all overlapping land between the McAllister Grant and Pine Hollow's current development. In short, they were offering to buy me out. The number? $125,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. For a piece of land I bought for $30,000. It was a good deal on paper, but I knew it meant they were desperate. That land was clearly worth far more to them than they let on. So I made a few calls. I hired a real estate attorney, someone sharp, someone who specialized in old land grants and title disputes. He looked through the McAllister Trust records and county files, then gave me news that made my jaw drop. "Ryan," he said during our first meeting, "you don't just own Lot 17B. According to the Land Trust settlement from 1984, when the last remaining McAllister holdings were consolidated, your parcel includes easement rights over 3 adjacent lots that are now part of Pine Hollow. That includes the one Karen lives on." I blinked. "You mean I could block access to her driveway?" "Technically, yes. Her driveway crosses a section of your easement. And that koi pond in her backyard? Fully on your side. If you were feeling bold, you could force them to either pay rent for the usage or remove anything built on your property." I leaned back in my chair, mind spinning. Karen wasn't just trying to push me out. She was building on my land. Her koi pond, her back fence. Even a corner of her decal of it was mine now. That changed everything. I didn't want to be petty, but after the stunt she pulled threatening me, dragging in a lawyer, lying about ownership. I didn't feel like playing nice either. So instead of replying to their letter, I sent one of my own. It was a formal cease and desist. I cited the exact land records and easement violations, demanding the removal of all unauthorized structures on my property. Within 30 days, I gave them the option to either negotiate a long-term land lease at market rate or begin dismantling everything that crossed into my legal boundary. I signed it, sealed it, and sent it off with tracking. It hit like a bomb. Karen showed up again a few days later, but this time she didn't come storming up the porch or threatening to call the sheriff. She looked defeated, less like a bulldozer and more like someone who just realized the cliff she was driving off had no bottom. "I want to talk," she said flatly, standing at the edge of my porch. I stayed seated in my rocking chair, arms folded. "About what?" She hesitated. "I didn't know. About the deed. About the easement." "I didn't know. You didn't ask," I replied. "You showed up, told me to leave, and tried to scare me off my own land. And now you're finding out you never owned as much as you thought you did." She looked away, jaw tight. "Look, Pine Hollow's investors are pressuring me. They want the land cleaned up, unified. They're ready to offer more. A real offer, not some lowball." I raised an eyebrow. "How much?" $300,000, she said. "For everything? Full rights, no holdbacks." I gave a slow whistle. "That's a big jump from 125. She nodded. "We've had appraisals done. They know what it's worth. And if you sell, the project moves forward. You walk away rich. Everyone wins." I stood up and stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "I didn't buy this land to flip it," I said. "I bought it for peace. You tried to steal that from me. You underestimated me. And now you want to buy your way out of it." Karen's face hardened. "If you refuse, they'll just drag you through court, tie you up in years of litigation. You won't get a dime. You'll waste your time defending every tree and rock." I smiled. "That's the difference between you and me, Karen. You see land as leverage. I see it as home, and I've got time." She stood there, silent, before finally turning to leave. That night, I lit a fire and sat out back, overlooking the trees, thinking about everything that had happened. It started with a ridiculous confrontation over a cabin. But now, I was sitting on land worth hundreds of thousands, land they needed. Land they couldn't have without going through me, and somewhere in a house she thought was entirely hers. Karen was realizing that a good portion of it was no longer hers at all. I hadn't just offended my home. I had flipped the entire power dynamic, and I wasn't going anywhere.